SAP Spend Management Executive Exchange.
Hello and a very warm welcome to SAP Spend Management Executive Exchange, navigating through the Polycrisis World in association with cnbc TV18.com. Each one of you sitting here today is navigating through an intense time of change, opportunity, ambiguity, all at once. We have all known the VUCA world. We are now looking at a tuna world, which is turbulent, characterized by conflict, disorder, confusion. We are also looking at the uncertainty bit of it, given the polycrisis novel, because it's new, not resembling anything that you have known before. And you're at the helm of affairs where everybody is looking at leaders like you to take those decisions and pave the way for the rest of the management to come through. And of course, ambiguous, because ambiguity is part of the new development, because everything that is happening can be looked at from various lenses. One set of people may think that, all right, AI is required. The other may say that we need to go with the conservative look and, do our risk mitigation properly. So I think all of you realize where we are coming from, and therefore I think we are in an era where leadership sort of demands continuous learning and of course looking at things that are likely to happen, and with the foresight and of course the experience of where you are coming from. And now we are also looking at polycrisis, which is being defined as, it's a new term after COVID, it has been coined. And people are talking about various crises that are happening all together, whether it is geopolitical, domestic, inflation, regulation, or now climate crisis as we are talking about it. So today, I think it'll be an interesting discussion, because we have everybody who is at the helm of affairs where you are working at. And I think more than ever, we now are realizing why industry needs to come together, not just to network, but also to share experiences and to figure out what's working and perhaps what's not working, so that as a collective, we don't make the same mistakes and learn what has worked for another. So with that, let me start the discussion where we are talking about spend management. It's an interesting subject. And I'm sure everybody thinks in a very different way, because, we have pan-industry representation here today. So it'll be an interesting discussion. So let me start by introducing everybody formally. We have with us Arpit Raj, Head of Logistics and Customer Service, Godrej Consumer Products Limited. Bhushan Deshpande from ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel India, CIO. Tanushi Bagrodia, Chief Financial Officer, Lakshmi Organic Industries Limited. Mr. Manikantan Vishwanathan, CFO, PI Industries Limited. Ashwani Narang, Vice President, Intelligent Spend and Business Network, SAP Indian Subcontinent. Mr. Sandeep Satpathy, Head Supply Chain Management, Tata Steel. Mr. Manoj Agrawal, Senior Vice President, Finance, Kalpatru Limited. I welcome all of you to this roundtable. Thank you for taking out time. Bhushan, if I may come to you first, because steel and, of course, a large merger, two huge companies coming together with a lot of experience. When we talk about spend management, and we are looking at a product here which is perhaps making the foundation for every other industry. How are steel companies optimizing spend management amidst fluctuating raw material cost, global supply chain disruptions? How does it differ upstream, downstream, and what is actually happening in the world with polycrisis, and how is it affecting business?
Hi, Mumta. Thanks a lot. Thank you, SAP, for having us here. So spend management. So we are an integrated steel manufacturing unit with assets like mines, ports, power units, and upstream and downstream manufacturing facilities. So spend management, I would like to break it into three parts. One is the inbound supply chain. Second is the operations, the core manufacturing or the operations. And third is the outbound supply chain. So for us and for every industry, I think there are immense opportunities in all these three areas. So the way we see it is, what is that we need to do? A, we need to have an ability to record everything that is happening, every transaction that happens in all these three areas. Once we have that, then at least we know what is happening. And the next step is to identify, find ways to try and optimize everything that happens. So, in a nutshell, it's all about that, identifying what is happening and then find ways. And we'll come to that as to what could be the ways. It could be business process optimization, it could be technology intervention, variety of things. But that, in a summary, is our view.
Uh, Sandeep, because you're both from the same industry, keen to know your take on how polycrisis sort of affects the functioning of steel conglomerate, and also what happens then in terms of a trickle-down effect to whether it's vendors, whether it is customers, whether it is your own functioning. So what are then those key elements that need to be seen as a risk mitigation when we are also talking about spend management?
Yeah, I'll take little time to explain this. But I'm just trying to say that, as you know, Tata Steel being a more than 100-year organizations, and you today, if you see any auto industry, whether it is two-wheeler, four-wheeler, just name it, we are there since the day they are in India, they are having their manufacturing units. So mostly the entire auto industry is depending upon Tata Steels, mostly. Now, I will just not just take some share of business, but mostly they are either they are importing or they are mostly dependent on Tata Steel. Although ArcelorMittal, they have the big stake now, and other JSW is also there.
True.
But I would say that all the trials, etc., because as you know, all the auto industry, when they look at you, they go through a very rigorous approval process. All their laboratories in outside India, it has to be approved 3-phase, 4-phase approval. So it needs a lot of, you have to spend a lot of money in giving this, going through these approval processes. And sort of, these are not coming into your revenue. These are all, you are investing to get orders later on. And you have to have a patience, you have to have a infrastructure, you have to have organizations you have to have a R&D to connect. So I think when all these pandemics has happened, and also, so Tata Steel is in a phase that we can't say, if you are already in a process, you can't just stop there. So what had happened that whether you earn or don't earn on a particular transactions, Tata Steel is not much bothered about that. They see the relationship first. So that is why today any auto industry, they come to India. They first, for localization, they first look at us. So to honor that, so we have a huge responsibility towards the society. So to say that is one part of the story. Second is that infra. Today you are seeing the entire last few years, a lot of spending has been gone on the government is spending a lot of things on the infrastructure. There is a product called LRPC strands. You are seeing a lot of all the terminals and all the metros,
Right.
tunnels. These are all being made from a particular kind of, which is a replacement of the TMT. These are all initially is being mostly is being made by Tata Steel. And there are few small players are there, and right now JSW etc. are getting into it, and other steel industry are mostly auto-centric. They are not into infrastructure, specialized infrastructure sectors. So to say, we have a huge responsibility towards the society, and a lot of investment is happening in this area. Now comes that where is your EBITDA? But let me tell you, these are all long-term investments. And company is looking at it that going forward. Today, as you know, last 6-7 years, now we are 18 to 20 million tons. And gradually we are expanding. We have one manufacturing unit at Jamshedpur 100 years back. Now we have a greenfield at Orissa more than 10 years back. Then we have few acquisitions, brownfield in Orissa, in Maharashtra, in northern sides. So with these acquisitions, we are also heading towards more than 25. So although most of the steel industries are going for acquisitions, but
Right.
our acquisitions are all on the specialized sectors. We are not getting into more of a commodity sector. We are getting into very specialized sectors. So that's what this company is positioning themselves, and we think that we are in the right directions.
That is well set up the context. This was a great start. And I always wonder, with bigger conglomerates, I guess you're talking about acquisitions, but that also includes a lot of spend management must be seen there. How does that pan out with the departments that are actually looking at acquiring companies and mergers? Is that a huge part of then your spend management and risk mitigation as well?
Yeah, definitely. See, that's what I said, that we are into a specialized sector always. So wherever the acquisition has happened, we have not gone for any random acquisitions for just to get some volumes. We have gone for acquisitions where we think that this particular setup can take you in that direction only. So last two acquisitions are based on that only. So we are majorly focusing on these two, and also the rural one. Rural one, as you know, that we are into this commodity sector,
Correct.
the retail sectors.
Yeah.
So we are into the farming, we are into the poultry, we are into the Sakti. This
Yeah.
we have a branded called Tata Sakti in the roofing segment. We are into service and solutions, in majorly into service and solutions. So Tata Steel is going towards all specialized sector where
People-centric and
people-centric, and we have a huge commitment to the society. So chairman's always guidance is that let's move in that directions. Money will
come in. Well, right. Mr. Vishwanathan, I'll take you in here. An agri-science company that started business in 1946.
Yep.
And it's been a while, and agri-science as an industry also has seen a lot of changes since then. In this particular space, especially processes and efficiency related new tools and trends, what have you seen, and what are some of the things that have been adopted by the company itself?
Wonderful. Thanks for the opportunity. It's a real pleasure to be here. And coming to the question directly is, when it's an agro-science company, PI Industries is one of the leaders, and we are the first Indian company to register the molecule in the world map. So one of its kind. If you ask, the USP is an R&D. Okay. Coming to that important one is on the spend management. Obviously, there are spends which is controllable, which is not controllable, first decided in that manner. Then we have a very strict budgetary fund management through SAP kind of thing. If you ask, do you have a spends? Yes, the spends are there in the areas as rightly said by him. In the ESGO, which is next, which is responsible for the society,
Right.
What next? That's a huge spend has been committed. And then second spend is on digital. Okay, very important is, how do you go into the next level of process? When I talk about process, not transaction process individually, also to production, also to the R&D molecule development process. Because if you look at it, any molecule normally it takes more than 15 years or so. Whereas the first Indian company, we could able to look at the first molecule much lesser period of 7 to 8 years, and also at a much better pricing. This is on the very focused cost control on areas we specifically focus. We have tools around, majority on SAP around, like fund management and cost center based control, which is what it helps us is, before the spend is committed, we come to know whether it is within our things or not. Okay, that's where the things, once we commit, thereafter this is a follow through. Rest of the things, that's where is all the commitments are in the beginning of the thing, not in the end of the tunnel. So that's where the second one is very important. Currently it's going on, as we rightly said, is the pricing trend of various, whether you call it raw material, you call it conversion cost, you call anything. So each of these areas is well looked into on a dynamic pricing model. Okay. kind of thing is it has one where we use this new tools, AI tools or whatever wherein we can have clearly a focus on our current costs extrapolated to the next 3 quarters or next 2 quarters while the budgets are being there. Can I have a look at it today? Because when I release a, let's say for a raw material purchase order for a X, I really know that maybe 3 months down the line there's a price. So what happens to that? Right. So there is dynamic tools which we have. There are inherent tools, and that is where it is synced with SAP on its own. Okay, the moving at a price comes out of SAP and it moves on its own to this particular thing. So we have that areas wherein we have a thing. And if you ask me, these are all the tools available to all the companies do, yes. But addition to that, a multidisciplinary cadence of review is very important. So what is reviewed can only be controlled. Okay, that's our philosophy. And it's cadence is a must. And that's where we believe with the technological tool being available and the cadence gives us the edge to manage.
Very well put. What is reviewed can be controlled, and now you have digital options with the AI and Gen AI to help you with that. I'll come back to you on when did you feel that it is essential for a company to not build its own system, but to actually go to the market and say that, I need to go to somebody who understands the market and the digital spend management, perhaps reviews much better than me. And it's always an interesting difference when companies say ki hum ye apne aap karenge versus we go to a market leader who's doing the job, and that finesse, whether you want to spend the money at that point in time, again comes as part of spend management. Tanushree, I'll come to you. Lakshmi Organic Industries is a huge name in chemicals, and last 5 years have been very interesting, so to say. We see fluctuating raw material prices, stringent regulatory requirements, and of course, in this industry, if you have a supply chain disruption, it is much more disastrous than any other industry because of the nature of the product that you're dealing with. How are companies then, like yours, are balancing cost efficiency, compliance, along with sustainability goals? So there are too many now pillars to sort of balance. So I'll start with the polycrisis, the word itself. How has your industry been affected in the last 3-4 years? And if we were to look at your company's example, it could be anecdotal. If you would want to share something that you handled, which can be sort of replicated by other companies who are watching.
So, Mugdha, thanks. I think Lakshmi Organics, 3 decades old company, market leaders in our space. We do both essential and specialty products. Very rightly put, we deal with fluctuating raw material prices. And I think you were probably looking into my notes because how I describe spend is basically, which is BAU, which is all our raw material prices, the cost of goods sold, logistics, etc. Then there is the cost of running business, which is statutory, which is your entire, EHS spend, right? And then there is the growth spend. We're in a CapEx mode right now. So expansion, R&D, employee benefits, these are all sort of growth spends, right? Then comes the point of what is controllable and what is not controllable. So, when we talk about logistics costs, we are a net importer. We need to import our raw material. Can we actually control the logistics costs? No, we don't even control the raw material costs. So I think the question really comes in is, what can we control? And I think for us, we've realized as an organization that what we control is our operational efficiencies. And that translates into spend management, right? Because if we are really being the most efficient in the production of what we make, we are going to spend less. And I think that's been the focus for us on our BAU. And that's where actually technology has played a huge role. So we've actually started using data analytics to improve operational efficiencies. And, we've said this on our analyst calls as well. We increased 20% of our volumes, FY23 to FY24, in a bad market without any capex, because we just use technology to give us data analytics and to tell us where we could increase our efficiencies. And that, if you see, then translated into lower costs and better profitability for us. So I think that's one large area. I think the second large area for us is capex, because we are expanding. Right, we've just we announced last year that we will be spending about 700 crores on a large development that we are doing in Dahej. There, it's like what Sir just said, that what gets reviewed is what can be controlled. And I think while we all review the BAU, I think for us, the cadence of reviewing our capex spends has become extremely, extremely important. And, that's where we're actually using SAP to ensure that, our budgeting and our spend do match with one another. And I think the third thing when we come is on the EHS and the R&D bit, right? I don't think this for us as a company is a spend in the true sense of spend. I think we as a company pride ourselves in saying that EHS has to be a DNA within us, right? So we do spend on that. In fact, I'm very proud to share that, in the Mahad region where we are situated, if an event happens in another organization, our people are called as first responders even before potentially they call the Mahad Fire Brigade, right? So we train our people, we spend on that training, we spend on EHS, right? That for us is not a spend, that's an investment. Similarly on R&D. And I think that's just to ensure that there's sustainability of business. So I think that's the way we look at it. And just to sum it all up, I think spend management is a very, pardon me for saying this, it's a very abused sort of a term, right? And I think one looks at it as I look at it, or I would like to say it's QCD. It's quality, cost, and delivery. So are you delivering the quality of the deliverable or the outcome? The timeline in which the delivery is made, and then doing the cost-benefit analysis of saying, if I'm spending on this, am I getting the right outcome in the right time or not? And I think that's the philosophy with which one looks at spend management.
Wonderful. Quite a few points there. And I will definitely come back to both Mani and you on R&D, because, a lot of times we are seeing that a lot of people say what is not broken should not be fixed. Having said that, you just remain in a product mode or in an efficiency or a functional mode which has no room for improvement, or cannot adapt to a newer technology or a newer product change. And R&D sort of is something that get axed the first. That all right, there's so many other spends. Research and development can wait, when that is sort of the cornerstone of any risk mitigation in the future as well, because at least you're looking at your processes and the product itself. So I'm going to come back on R&D, and of course, I also would want to speak to you on vendors. How when we are looking at newer vendors, how do we suss out when to change, how to get to more looking at the spends? Because in a field like yours, which is so dynamic, you can't just take any vendor and you can't just have an acquisition just out of the blue. So then that also sort of becomes an important piece. All right. So with the first round, I'm just going to finish with Arpit and Mr. Agrawal. Arpit, Godrej Consumer Products is a huge conglomerate. There are too many verticals there, and it's not linear. There is a lot of there are a lot of nuances to it. The question is there something called future-proofing? Can you really future-proof? And given that there are so many things that may happen when we are talking about consumer products, what will you say are the top 3 things that you look at to somewhat future-proof? Because I think in this world, nothing can be future-proof.
One is that how is the consumer spend changing over time? And effectively, which demography is spending on what? So you saw a lot of cutbacks on consumer spending in COVID, and which said that there are a lot of discretionary spends that happened, and which is where you trying to subdivide. Even in the consumer segment, you sort of subdivide categories, saying that I want to spend in category A, but I don't want to spend in category B. And effectively, that is something which was unknown to us prior to COVID. The second thing which we saw in COVID, and which was the learning for, I think, majority of the CPG industry, was how can you adapt to a category change, a change in consumer pattern itself. Majority of our NPDs or new product developments prior to that event were pandering to the existing consumer.
Right.
For example, I am using a soap. Can I move to a liquid, say soap? What we saw there was that people who have not traditionally had any idea about sanitizers were picking sanitizers in huge, large quantities. And effectively, that is one piece that we saw wherein moving into COVID was easy, but people who were outside FMCG would not understand that moving out of it was as difficult, because many a times you have a consumer which is picked up in COVID and suddenly went down.
Right.
And essentially that is something majority of the CPG industry was not capable of handling it. So these are, from a demand lens, is that how do you look at a category and how do you sort of try and change or pander to the consumer behavior, and which is why CUTs is what is a consumer unit tests are much more important now into understanding the psyche of a consumer is becoming much more relevant than just reaching the consumer. People who would understand CPG would appreciate that earlier majority of the industry were harping on getting the product as deep as possible into the rural areas to drive growth. The idea now is to understand what the consumer pattern is and to accordingly, so you mentioned about R&D, is to accordingly change your R&D budgets to suit a pattern which sort of is what looks like it and what the consumer is going to happen in the future. That's one. The second part is that in terms of the allied vendor impact. So when we looked at, say, changing in the demand, how do you manage that through supply? So do you make it in-house? Do you want to outsource it? What is the type of outsourcing that you want to do? Majority of the organization or the light industries want to keep their asset light. Many people have mentioned about expansion. We recently went into an expansion of a fellow organization, and in that sort of taught us that there are many vendors who are not capable or do not want to invest heavily into infrastructure. So if you look at transportation industry, maybe say 10 years back, majority of the vendors would have their own trucks which are owned. As on date, that is exactly swiped. So majority of the major transporters that work now, except for the traditional ones that they are there, they don't have assets and they don't want to own assets. What they want to do is put own somebody's asset on a long-term contract and run it. That is something that the industry has to change and understand the psyche of it from a vendor impact point. The third part of it is the whole advent of the omni-channel commerce.
Yes.
Specifically on the likes of when I joined this industry about a decade and a half back, general trade or your near mom and pop store would tantamount to 95 or 96% of the sale. Today, that is hovering somewhere around 75, 76, which means that not only is omni-channel increasing, but it is increasing at a much faster pace than what the general trade is increasing. And effectively, our ability to react to that has to go up, because what you need there is a very different kind of servicing from a traditional FMCG industry like us. And similarly, there's some of our fellow FMCG organizations, because there what you need is a 10-minute delivery. Right. And which needs to have ample shelf life, which needs to be in a correct shape, which needs to have all the required assortment that you need to swipe on the app. Any gap in that would mean that your consumer is going to the competitor. And effectively, that is a psyche that you would want to invest in. So how do you balance that spend between the different channels to ensure that your effective assortment stays relevant is something that we have to do if we want to do that from future-proofing point of view. So these are three,
The
four.
only question I can ask you is, how many hours do you sleep? With so much happening, what happens with so many things to be handled.
As another as one of my ex CEOs used to tell, is that in majority of the events there is a hand of God which works. So you do 40% of the work and 60% you leave to the hand of God to sort of traverse through it. So I think a lot of it is also about feedback mechanism. Is that
Right.
Many organizations, they have a set way of working and they don't change their way of working, which is essentially a push driven concept, which says that, okay, this is what I've thought, this is the number of units I want to sell, and this is what I would do at the end of the day. In case of majority of these setups, right, it is also about that feedback flowing in and you accordingly making changes, which a lot of traditional FMCGs have done, and a lot of new age FMCGs have, when they have come in, specifically of the likes of the chemist or cosmetic channel, they have started adapting to these places at a much faster pace. And that is something I think for a larger FMCG organization as such is equally important for us to ensure that we stay relevant over time.
All right, Mr. Agrawal, I'll come to you. Very interesting field, real estate, going through a lot of changes. One of my favorite fields to also research. And I have looked at some of the latest trends that are increasing the efficiency and processes, be it AI algorithms, to analyze market trends, or it is blockchain being used for contracts, predictive maintenance in buildings. I mean, so much is coming in. Tell us about the Kalpataru experience then, because you have quite a presence in all income level products. How does it work with the new Gen AI and all the tools? And is the industry spending on it?
Thank you. First of all, Mugdha. See, real estate industry is little bit different from the industry, like steel industry or the consumer product industry itself. Because for us, every project, it's a factory. So whenever we launch any new project, for it's launching a new, factory itself, right? And in the real estate, especially in the Mumbai, our main raw material is the land, right? So if my product is of 1 rupees, then my land cost maybe 40 paisa to 60 paisa. So 40 to 60% is the land cost. So the rest is you can say the other raw material. And I can proudly say that my industry, real estate industry itself, almost around 80% of other manufacturing industries depend on my industry, right? Because I'm consuming everything, except food material, everything consumed in the real estate industry, right? And last decade in the real estate industry was little bit, slow down, and industry was, and today also it is little bit unorganized, right? Lot of unorganized player in the industry. Now organized are still limited. But thanks to COVID, after COVID, people realized the importance of their home, right? Earlier people, many, they were believing more on the okay, bhade pe le lenge, because today we are in Mumbai, maybe tomorrow we may shift to Bangalore. So let's live on rent. But after COVID, people are realizing that, okay, house is also important in life. And now, the city like Mumbai, people were adjusting in the 1 BHK, 3-4 family member are living. But after COVID, work from home culture, they need
Demands
more room,
different.
big size apartment. 2 BHK are looking for 3 BHK, 4 BHK. The COVID was boon for real estate industry, and demand again regenerated, right? So for us, spend management is, because as I said, in Mumbai, the land cost is my main cost, correct? And we don't buy everyday land,
right? It's again depend on the opportunity. And now in Mumbai, the land, it's scarce. Means you won't get the land, so you need to find the alternate opportunities. The alternate opportunities are like redevelopment, go with the society for the redevelopment arrangement, or maybe like if you have the land but you don't know how to develop or how to market, and people come for the joint development with us.
Right.
So for us, the major cost is the land, directly or indirectly, right? And then other things, definitely raw material. Okay, there is a dependency on the different product, but the dependency is because it's a labor intensive industry. So major is the labor, right? Labor contractor is the one more important things in my industry.
It's interesting you talk about the land parcels because one thing that we are seeing post-COVID especially is a lot of movement in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And a lot of your big conglomerates who were only focused on bigger cities are now moving to tier 2, tier 3 cities, because you're also seeing data centers coming, you're seeing manufacturing. So wherever there is infra development, you're seeing a lot of your big conglomerates going. Does expansion of geography also come in your spend management? Do you also look at the forecasting like that? And are there newer geographies that you explore with your partners?
So again, real estate industry itself is it's a from the geography point of view, you will see that there are a lot of regulation attached to this industry. So you need to be specialized first, then you can think about the expansion, right? If you are a Mumbai developer, if you want to expand in Pune, again in Pune, the local requirement, compliance and governance is different.
It's different in Lonavala, Khandala itself. The two are next to each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So before going to, in another states or another location, definitely you need to have a specialized, you need to have that particular knowledge. And there, like in today, like AI and all these things may help you because you can understand the local requirements over there. But it's a specialized job. You can do, if you are specialized in your area, you do in your own area. Okay, like big conglomerate, because they have that type of resources, then you can expand. You have that type of knowledge, then you can expand.
I was at a real estate conclave where they were talking about a lot of processes being put in place for cleaning of the books in real estate department. And, the credibility and transparency was one of the main focus because when you're looking at foreign investors coming in, they want absolutely clean books. And I think that is one of the things which you have to start from the very beginning. And some of the digital tools are helping you manage that. So I'm going to come back to you. It's a favorite subject of mine. So I'm going to come back to you on that. All right, Ashwini, I'm going to give you the last word on the first round and talk to you about pan-industry experience. SAP is, of course, dealing with so many products and so many stakeholders and so many partners and customers. What are some of the trends that you have seen in spend management? And what are some of the tools that you are also developing to stay abreast with the changing times? Because as a technology, technology provider also, you need to keep up with the changing times.
Thank you very much, Mukta, and thank you very much to all of you for coming. And I've been given a good task by Tanushree to try and help explain what spend management is. So I'll try to do justice.
Spend management. The spend management tools.
I'll try and do justice to this. And I jotted down a few things, and I will be trying to be quick enough, and then probably I'll take up your question at the end. So I noted a few things, and I believe it's an obligation to me to at least put some hard-hitting questions back to all of us, because this is what we keep getting from you only, and our job is to get a solution out. And that's what the government also asks. So we have a large responsibility in front of us. And I believe, Bhushan, you mentioned recording every transaction, or Sandeep, you mentioned responsibility towards society. I believe a lot of us said that. So let me ask this question back to all of you. Can you tell me today how much of your spend is, if you're spending, let's say 100 rupees in a year, how much of that spend is going to a women-empowered organization? How much of that spend is going to a rural-empowered organization? How much of that spend is going to, let's say, a minority-owned company? Because we all owe it to the society, we mean it, right? But let me ask you these questions. Do you know the answer as of today? Now, you might know something, you might not know something. All I'm trying to do is tell you how we look at it minutely, and that is why spend management becomes important. And you did mention, Sandeep, about acquisitions. When we are acquiring, we talk about the financial health of the company we are acquiring. But do you know there's a supplier who's been working with this company who has been charged with, let's say, reputational risk. And therefore, the moment you acquire that company, you will have some negative press going behind you because you didn't check the facts. Do you do that? Right? So is there a mechanism for me to understand if I can look into all such things before I decide to? I mean, a lot of parameters would be in place, but do I know the supplier base of that company well? For that matter, my own. Or Vishwanathanji, you also mentioned about ESG is a big thing, and let me ask you a question. How much carbon footprint did you generate today? Let's say 35 of your people in your company travel today. How much carbon emission did they do today? Or for that matter, you acquired a raw material from a particular supplier. What was the carbon rating over there? Or for that matter, because the government started on the e-invoicing, so I must congratulate the government. They stopped the use of the paper. Because of that, how much cubic water did you save today? Now, I might have information to all of it. I might not have information to all of it. All I'm trying to say is this is going to be really important. If you come from a tire industry, let me tell you, there's a new norm which is called EUDR. If you are selling in European market and manufacturing it anywhere in the world, and soon it'll come your way as well. Chemical for sure, for sure it's coming your way. They're saying it's the EU norm for deforestation. Before you come and try and sell this tire in my market, you need to tell me how many forests did you cut? Do you have that information as of today? So this is where I'm trying to go, not trying to say the company is not looking into this. And then, there's another point, Vishwanathan, you mentioned, before a spend is committed, we need to know. Once a spend is committed, we need to know. But is it being followed?
Obviously, yes. Because the fund management tool, when you load the funds into the fund management tool with the cost center, when you take out a PO, even before PO, purchase requisition itself, it's SAP has a ability to stop there.
Yeah. So let me tell you the experiences we have seen, and because I come from SAP, I know what else is required. For example, I did a contract for this glass, right? It's a 100 rupee glass, for example. Now, I did a brilliant sourcing exercise, negotiated this for 3 months, written a contract. But after 6 months, the price got changed. The CFO will gleefully sign on it because the system doesn't stop it. Because the new PO says it's 105, it's still within your budget. Because the budget is overall department's budget, let's say. It's not on the SKU. And that's where we need to do the trick. Is it getting followed? So there are certain things which are getting followed. There are certain things which we probably need to do. And that's where we say, I am committing a spend to a supplier where I did a great negotiation exercise, but after 6 months, because the fuel price went up, the transportation from Delhi to Mumbai got heavy, and I'm paying that particular percentage. Sometimes you might know, sometimes you might not know.
That's exactly what I meant by a cadence.
Immediately
for the discipline cadence.
There you go. The system basically is going to stop this for you. The system will raise, you won't even be able to raise a PR for that matter. Forget about doing post facto. It will not allow you to raise a PR if you're going or violating a particular policy, even if you're doing it in your own company. So there are ways and methods and mechanism and a solution available or a tool available for that matter to stop it from violating that policy. For example, if you're a manager and if you log in from your profile, the system will not allow you to buy certain items, maybe a laptop which is not meant for you, let's say. So that's what I'm saying. So this is where we need to stop. We don't do post facto, we do pre facto.
Ashwini, I think what you're saying in a nutshell is, or at least my takeaway is, the things which are material, okay, and from a CFO's lens, I'd say whatever is material really gets looked at. There are dashboards made for it. It gets reviewed and it's monitored. I think what I've really liked in all that you've said is it's some of these very minute things which may not be material, quote unquote, which gets missed out. And sometimes God's in the details,
Yes.
right? And that's where I think systems can help.
That is correct.
But I also then believe that, and that's where we need help, and we need to ask for help in configuring our systems correctly, in understanding how the system can be used to its 100%, right?
Absolutely.
Everything that you said today, the PR will not be released, or if the PR is there, the PO will not be released. Have we configured our systems correctly?
There you go.
And I think that's where we need to ask for help.
100%. So that's the entire, see, look, I need to learn from you. So I can probably try and help yourself and myself to build a product to help you to get that in place. And by the way, if I just go very quickly, you did talk about pricing trend. Before I get into a sourcing exercise to negotiate for a particular commodity, because you all deal with this, or a particular entity, steel, which you probably are buying from these two gentlemen, have you ever tried to do the should cost? What should be the cost, right? I get into this because I asked 5 suppliers. They came in, they offered us a particular price to me. I challenge you today, you introduce another one, the price will drop further. Or maybe it'll get another competition in there. So this will continue to happen. But what is that price I should look at? What is that should cost? So that's where pricing trends would come into picture and quickly trying to maneuver. Yeah. So what's reviewed can only be controlled. That's what's it's a brilliant statement, right? What's reviewed can only be controlled. But are you being proactive? For example, if before I start the business with a particular supplier, we are worried about our own CSR, ESG footprint and whatnot. Do you know the ESG footprint of all your suppliers, for that matter? Or if I ask even a tougher question, it's very easy for me to say, this coffee comes from Ghana. Does it really come from Ghana? What about the material traceability? Where is the source of this particular item? Because you like it, you don't like it, BRSR tells you, you will have to declare all of this mandatorily by 2026, like the way you're doing your P&L statement every quarter. If you don't have your sustainability scorecard given back to the government, you are going to be costlier than your competition in the market pretty soon, because you will have a cess on top of it, and which is not going to be only in India, but you will be barred from, let's say, European nations. You can't sell there, for that matter. So are you prepared for it? We are just 1 year away, 1.5 years away. Okay, so Tanishri, you mentioned about, can we control the logistics cost or material cost? You say we can't, but we can. We can negate the rise. It's not about savings always, it's about containment also. And that's where we have, like I talked about, should cost, so we need to be aware how basically we can take care of the market indices and probably stop the rise of what is going to make your product costlier than your competition. And that's where you get hit more.
So agreed. But my point was more about saying that in spend management, let's look at somebody like us who's a net importer, right? If I'm importing the raw material and there's a Red Sea crisis, and then there's a shortage of containers, the logistics costs go up, right? That's not something that we control. That's not something that we can influence directly. Similarly, as a commodity buyer, those prices we can predict. We can have tools that help us predict those costs, but we can't sort of control those costs.
Okay, so let me quickly give a point of view. I hope I'm not taking too much time, but I am loving the conversation and we can continue more in your office. By the way, there is somebody who would be a smart buyer in your company who would write a brilliant contract. For example, saying, if the fuel prices go up by 7%, I'm not going to give you any rise in your price. The same is going to happen if, because of you, my shipment is stuck. I'm going to charge you 2% on the invoice. And all this is possible. This happens, and the system.
So Ashwini, I'm not denying that, and like we probably discuss this, subsequently. It's an interesting discussion, but I think it also depends company to company and industry to industry, because these dynamics do play out. But these dynamics don't necessarily play out in every industry. And I'll share my experience. I've been in auto comps before, right? There, what you're saying plays out, right? In a case where you're getting a tanker load of material and your contract is a CIF contract, I really don't have that ability to control these things, right? I could write a contract, but that contract may get commercially renegotiated because sometimes you're at the mercy of the supplier, right?
I agree with that. See, my limited point, and I'm very happy to come see you in your office and discuss this in detail. My limited point was, even if you negotiate a contract as of today, is there a mechanism where the system tells you, you have negotiated a brilliant contract, use that, don't lose that 2%. That's my limited point. So
absolutely,
it might exist in papers, but the system doesn't help you.
Absolutely. And that's where I come back and I say, yes, we definitely as SAP users at some point in time need to come back and say, are we using the system 100% to what it was designed to use? And if we are suboptimally utilizing it, first ones to come and say, please do help us.
Yeah, for sure. And look, operational efficiencies, you talked about it. Let me ask you a thing. You order a pen at your house, Zepto, Blinkit, or Amazon, or maximum 15 minutes to a day, it's in your house. When you do it in your office, how much time it takes? Forever, yeah. So forever. So it's like this is efficiency for me. I'm getting it in my house. My kids talk about it, or my neighbors talk about it, but I don't give it to my employees. Where is that experience? Do you have an asset intelligence network within your company? So if my asset goes under breakdown, what's my knee-jerk reaction? I get into a system, I look at the manual, I would call somebody, I'll pick up the phone, speak to somebody. Somebody might not come. What if I give you a button, you're connected directly to the OEM, everything is reflecting over there. And your machine is speaking to the other machine. So you have a clone of your own machine, which can tell the other machine, oh, you are under breakdown. What happened to you? This happened. Oh, this happened to me 3 months ago. Maybe that's the reason. Do we have that kind of a network, And very quickly trying to, you mentioned fire brigade, right? People won't call fire brigade first, they'll call you first, That's the reputation you have made. Imagine a blue-collar employee which you hire, he did some pilferage or some wrong means, you fired him, but he gets hired in your company back again. May not be at the same location, maybe at another location, or probably if you are ignorant enough, through an agency in the same location. How do you control that? Your reputation goes for a toss. That's the reputation you build, right? How do you control that? And then, Mugdha, you said R&D exed first, not for us. We are spending 6% of our...
You're doing everybody's job, so obviously you have to spend most on your R&D.
Arpit, you talked about consumer and demography spend. You do this for your customers. Do you do this for your company? When I say that, maybe you have 10 companies, 10 plants, maybe a decentralized system. I'm sorry, I'm not aware. But can you tell me today, how much did you spend on A4 paper last year? So that's the way of looking at it. Now, moving into COVID, out of COVID, you're totally right. Are we future ready? Do you have a spend control tower in your company which can tell you, this is how you're spending today, AI comes into picture, this is how it's going to be in the next 6 months or a years. And then probably, COVID days, we used to love the inventory, get more inventory. Now we are trying to get rid of it. But what about vendor managed inventory? How many of you are burgeoning your books? You talk about clean books. How many of you are burgeoning your books, especially in your case, because you are not doing vendor managed inventory? And if I'm doing vendor managed inventory, probably I have all critical components within 2 kilometer reach of my radius where I have a live dashboard. Because my vendor tells me, if I do vendor managed inventory for you, I'm going to charge you 0.5% extra because I'm keeping this on my books for you. But have you ever seen that? No. Do you have a live dashboard between you and your vendor to tell you this is the vendor managed inventory booked for you? So I'm happy giving 5.5%, but it's not happening today.
Ashwini has listed everyone's challenges.
I've tried to. I've a lot more. Do I have time?
No, I
can
want to
try.
go. I want to do another round and then come back to you for it.
And for AI, the question which you asked,
Yeah.
and sorry, I've noted a lot of things, but I'm sorry I don't have time to cover this. But the question on AI you asked, on spend management in specific, we have delivered 44 AI business use cases as of today. There are 55 more which are going to be out in the next 6 months. So we are talking about 100 plus AI use cases where the system is going to prepare for itself. To your question, I can tell Siri to order something from me maybe next year. That's going to be possible. So
I wanted to come to each one of you to understand what are the major challenges at the moment. I know Ashwini listed a few of them, but industry specific. And I'm not talking about your organization per se, but as leaders in an industry where you're seeing a lot of other people, new businesses, startups coming. What are some of the challenges that you see in spend management? Let me start with you, Sandeep and Bhushan, and especially talk about steel industry. We are looking at Industry 4.0. We are also looking at lighthouse certifications, etc. But everything needs scope 1, scope 2, and your vendors have to be part of it. How is that due diligence maintained? What are the challenges that come with working with other vendors? And is that one of the things that requires more R&D? Other than that, what are the other challenges that per se a large conglomerate like yours that is dealing with such an essential product faces?
See, I just tempted to react to some of the point Ashwini has said. See, today, entire our peer to the payment cycle is faceless. I mean, there is nobody in the entire organizations, none of the more than 1,000 vendors are working for Pan-India Tata Steel. So none of the vendors, they know who are in purchase department, who are in the accounts department, who is the disbursement department. Nobody knows anyone.
So the
it's a faceless
transparency,
organization.
credibility gets
Entire
sorted
it is
there.
faceless. Now coming to the just 2 days back, I got a call from one of our raw material supplier that, sir, we have there is a payment, 6 days the payment has to come, and there is a message from automated message has come that your things are blocked because my GST compliance is not there. So our system is so integrated that if the vendor's GST compliance is not there from the GST portal, then automatically the system puts the block. And then he has to furnish all the details, and then it will be checked, and that is also through systems only. So there is nobody is doing any favor to anyone, and nobody is approving anything or bypassing anything, or a master approval, please pay. There is no person over there. So today the challenge, since we are multi-locational today, the challenge is that how can we have on a real-time basis, we should get the data. Start from the raw materials. Today, on the forecast basis, all the steel companies are procuring their raw materials, because the raw material contracts, I'm talking about mainly iron ore, the coke, etc. These are all yearly contracts. So how quickly and how efficiently you can use those, because you have multi-locational production facilities. We have 3 integrated steel manufacturing in 3 different locations. So the resource is the same. So today, like everybody is saying, the working capital is the key. Earlier, this working capital comes under, mostly the supply chain used to handle this working capital. Now, debtors part is something which normally M&S used to, marketing and sales used to do it. But this working capital, that is the inventory turn. How fast, quickly you can turn around your inventory cycle to get the things done. So some of our divisions are working on negative cash flow. So these things are possible only with your tighter control, and tighter control can be possible only with the real-time data. You can have it in your systems. So just to say that since we are on SAP from the day one, I think early 2000, and a lot of modules has come up. And also it is not possible because we have done a lot of brownfield acquisitions also. So these companies are also having their own systems. So you just can't say ki everything you throw out and I will have a new systems put in place. So you have to adapt certain systems and then plug into things. So that is what company tries to do, and appoint consultants to do how we can, and that too sort of a risk management we are talking about. So we are majorly into ERM. And every small things is being reviewed in the enterprise risk management, and it is seen that how next 4 years, 5 years, what are the challenges you are going to face. That is a vast subject, and is a big a big team is working for ERM. And EHS etc. is our DNA, so we never talk about this. CSR or EHS, we never ever talk about it. And today I proud to say that carbon footprint and all these are being promised by Tata Steel officially with one year. Normally people say 2035 I will be this, 2040 I will be this. Ours is every year there is a published in all the footprints we have published. What are our achievements, and next year what will be our, then next year what will be our, every year's numbers are being published and it is being declared in our, so that's what.
I guess, when we talk about Tata Steel's experience, of course, it's a marquee company and, everybody looks up to it for the processes they have set up. But I think if I were to look at the challenges for other industries and for other upcoming companies, etc., I think one of the things that you're talking about is, of course, working capital optimization. We are also talking about how to use data in real time, and also to the point where we are talking about ESG and sustainability. I mean, merely reporting will now not help. It has to be part of the DNA. Otherwise, it doesn't sort of, it won't reflect in your books the way it should for more finance to come in. Bhushan, with your company's experience, what are some of the challenges that you see in spend management? And are there any tools that you are using given the risk mitigation that you have already done?
So some of the challenges I think my friend here has outlined, more or less similar. However, we are in a different position. When we look at what is happening at ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel here in India in particular, we are close to 8 to 9 million tons per annum. And it's available in the public domain. The plan is to grow it to take it to 30-40 million tons per annum. So what it means is we need to secure our raw material base. That is one of the risks. Everyone is facing that. So for us, it means iron ore and of course coal, coke, everything. That is first part. And of course, there are ways to secure that, long-term contracts, hedging in some cases for gas and other utilities. That is one. Second is, let us say you secure the raw material, how to make sure that you have means to transport it to your location, the facility. So what we are talking about, securing ports, then making sure that you have the ships to transport the goods to the raw material again to your manufacturing facility. That is another part of it. Another important, when we look at steel, power is one of the key utilities. So it's not just conventional power. We were talking about green power again. So how to identify the right source, and again make sure that you have enough capacity available to feed or to consume rather from the consumer. These are some of the challenges on the supply chain, inbound supply chain standpoint. And what we call as the connected assets, one of the ways to secure it is to, let's say, identify a partner, make sure that you get into that vertical for power generation for that matter, or port, you identify a partner who can work with you long term and gain or leverage that advantage of partnership when it comes to costs, because that's a significant cost. So this is part of the story. And again, the inorganic growth, you talked about systems. We inherit a lot of systems. And there becomes, or there lies the challenge of data, because all these transactions generate huge amount of data. Now, what is expected is analyze the data and make sure that you come up with a decision support system. It could be predictive, prescriptive analytics. Everyone has been doing that, but the key here is the agility. How quickly you can analyze the data and come up with a meaningful decision support tool. That's always the key. And because of everything that is happening, not just within your company, but external factors, this is one of the key requirements. Agility in everything that we do. And I'm sure it's a universal story, not just for ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel as such. So I think those are some of the key challenges, particularly from an industry vertical standpoint. I'll not go into the upstream part where we are talking about the customers and their changing demands, but that's for a separate discussion.
Arpit, if I may come to you on that, data mining comes at a cost. Data segregation, of course, is a challenge. How much of that data is, and especially in a customer-centric organization, of course, a lot of people were facing challenges with managing omni-channels. They weren't in sync. Then you have customer acquisition, and then your customer's story in itself is very unique and is very different with each subset. What are the tools then come in handy? Does spend management get better with the new age digital tools, or is it a lot of data suddenly to mine from?
See, I'll start by, I think there was a lot of discussion on systems and on the SAP and what sort of exception reports it can throw up, right, in terms of it. I've always said that any system is a garbage in, garbage out, which is that until you have a process of doing things the correct way, right, wherein your as simple as somebody raised the point of purchase requisition. If your purchase requisition process in itself allows a lower level executive to enter an incorrect data, that will essentially flow down, right? And that is something which essentially is ingrained into the culture of the company. There are systems to ease your work, which is basically to automate a lot of manual pieces that is being done. However, despite all of that, the first input as such would still be a manual one. Till now, it is very difficult in say when you are talking about an FMCG space in particular, when you're touching across 1 million direct outlets, right, and a couple of million more indirectly. It is very difficult for you to understand and maybe draw relevant insights from it. I would want to sort of quote Nielsen, which is majority of the FMCG organizations, they base their market share data on Nielsen. What is the sample size of Nielsen versus the sample size of actual outlets that are there? Largely, those sample size might not be relevant in majority of the geographies, right? And hence what happens is that in many times what happens is that a relevant and a correct data set and drawing a simple insight from it becomes much more useful than trying to sort of impose 20 input parameters and then trying to see. So to see on what the output is going to be. I'll take a simple example of it. There is in FMCG, there is a terminology called an RPI, which is basically a relative price index. And what index are you selling your concerned product versus the competitor, essentially versus the category leader? And largely a majority of it depends on the input which is there from Nielsen. And what we have seen at times is that those inputs are biased by a lot of manual say discussions which happen between the organization, and effectively that sort of changes the way you want to progress as far as, and this is as sensitive a parameter as MRP for a particular product. The same is what is the type of product that you're doing. So what is the variant that you want to offer to the consumer? What is the feel that you want to offer to the consumer? And hence, I feel that at times we sort of try and over-index. We try and overuse AI. We try and overuse feeding in data into everything. Okay. Many a times we place a lot of emphasis on saying that, okay, how the pack is going to look, whether it is nice, is the pack looking shiny of it, what is the paper used, how many times we actually as a consumer you look and go and feel in the market. So I think a lot of times it is also about over-indexing of data, and try and see drawing relative insight of it can help you in many regards. The second part, which is there in terms of getting correct data, is to draw a correct sample set out of it, which means that, for example, if a lot of these omni-channel partners, they all have access to their POS data, right, which is your point of sale data. How many of them are they willing to readily share it with them? I would challenge you that if at all, and many organizations would manage, if at all, I think only 10% of at max of omni-channel people would share their actual POS data with any organization. And that becomes a huge challenge, because at the end of the day, despite having all the data with the vendor, or with your concerned channel partner, you're kept guessing. We are kept guessing for the amount of inventory, you're kept guessing for the amount of sale. And then you sort of, what do you try and do is you create surrogates, which again become inaccurate, and hence you plan your inventory on those surrogates, right? Which becomes a huge churn when you mentioned somebody about, say, inventory turns, right? And say having low working capital. Effectively, many a times what also happens is that keeping those surrogates as simple as possible can help you in a market as diverse as India. Lastly, what I would want to say is that is in terms of the way you want to react to the consumer. So, for example, when you are, say, one side is your, say, consumer or your demand, the other side is in terms of the vendor inventory. We place a lot of emphasis on giving, say, access to vendors, giving access to people on SAP, right? Taking as many data on vendor managed inventory. I have had severe expenses with incorrect VMIs being there, incorrect data, and then the entire value chain till the end of the consumer being there. So end-to-end visibility of data is good, provided what I feel that the systems, and I'm sure I'm being very direct, but provided the systems also have visibility to do the data sanity check, which I mean, I'll be happy to be proven wrong, but to my experience, it has been limited. And the ability to be able to evolve that from one market to other has been a major challenge, because what happens is that the systems are involved in say in West, and now when you have to go East,
another geography,
it becomes
difficult.
a huge challenge, because then they are not tailor-made for it.
Got it. I'll get Ashwini to answer that question towards the end, but I do want to come to both Tanushree and Mr. Vishwanathan on another aspect of spend management and risk management, which is climate crisis. How is climate crisis, because that's totally unpredictable, and we have seen in the past that whether it is with flash floods, whether it is with something like a COVID pandemic, which is also being looked at as something which is coming out of environment, and the kind of changes that we are seeing at a global level with global warming and other environmental crises. Are organizations then and their spend managements ready for a crisis like this?
That's a very, very interesting point, Mugdha. And I'll share an anecdote, right? But before I share that anecdote, I think Bhushanji spoke about green power. I think when we talk about climate change, when we talk about sustainability, I think what's very interesting to note also is that green power is not just friendlier for the environment; it's also friendlier for balance sheets, because it's cheaper than conventional power. But having said that, I think we as a company actually use all three sources of green power: hydro, wind, and solar. And I think very, very true to what you mentioned. Getting the right source of renewable power, finding the right vendor becomes very, very important. And I think in this entire journey of climate change and spend management, that's a key requirement, because again, our business is extremely power and fuel intensive. So power and steam intensive, I'd say. So that becomes important. But when we then come to, spend management, and you mentioned floods, I don't know how many of you are aware that in 2021, the Mahat district actually had flash floods, which were once in 100 years. And there's a dam that is there on the river, which the government had to open because otherwise villages would have submerged. One of our manufacturing units is on the bank of that river. And so what turned around and happened was the dams were opened. So it was incessant rain. Rain was anyways coming into our premises, and then these dam doors got opened. We had about 15 to 16 feet water in a chemical factory where you have generators, motors, etc., all submerged.
Nobody can future-proof that.
Right? No. Now, this is where spend management comes in, right? And I think that was one event where we said, okay, this is once in 100 years event. Nothing can be proofed, right? But can be mitigated. And as a part of our spend management, we decided we were going to do flood proofing. So what we then took as a mandate was that whatever were the critical safety items, generators, motors, they were all elevated to 15, 16 feet high level. That was a spend that we did, right? It was something that we did because of EHS, something that we did for the safety of our own people, the safety of the villages around us, and we also did it because of sustainability of operations.
And also, you couldn't have moved it because of the employment of so many people.
But now coming from there, right, now that we are doing this expansion in Dahej is also very close to the seashore, and you don't know how climate is going to change. I think one of the discussions that we had was, what have we learned from these instances? And the project team was very clear that in our budgets, we have provided for flood proofing to the extent that we can. If technology could actually give us an input along with IMD that tells us how rain is going to happen and how we can actually navigate these floods, I think that would be awesome, because we cannot move our production unit, like you very rightly mentioned. I think on the flip side, like I said, we are a very power and steam intensive company. And again, climate plays a major role. And suddenly these temperature increases. Machinery has not been made
to work in that temperature.
Sometimes you look at the wet bulb and you say, but the wet bulb ambient temperature was not set for this level, right? And suddenly the temperature levels are way higher than they need to be. And I think at that point in time, then the spend management really is no longer spend management. And I go back to saying it's quality cost delivery. Are you looking at the quality of your deliverable, the sustainability of your operations, and what's the cost benefit analysis? And I think this is only going to exacerbate as we go forward, because none of us are able to predict how the weather is going to change.
True.
If I may just take another minute on this, while I'm talking from a chemical industry perspective, I've worked in the automotive industry. I have a friend who works in the ply industry. And one of the key things that really comes up is, so chemicals, you have DCS controlled systems, so you don't have that much of manpower, right? Real estate, great example. how do you expect people to work in that 45, 46, 48 degrees, right? In automotive, you could provide them with fans, you could air condition certain units. I hear from people, you can't do that in all industries. You can't do that in real estate. And that's going to increase the cost.
He spoke about, Mr. Agrawal spoke about the labor costs.
Absolutely.
Climate has a huge impact on the labor cost as well.
So I think we will need to manage these costs. And I think that's where systems can come in, because I am now sitting here and I'm saying we make our annual business plans, right? We provide for certain budgets. And then suddenly a summer comes or a flood comes. Now, can I have a system that helps me put that this is my base case? This could be the opportunity and this could be the risk.
Right.
Then I think, life becomes... Then you're range bound and you're saying, okay, now I can play within this range.
Got it. Quite a few anecdotes there. And, one would assume that climate has a role to play, but that huger role to play, and in times to come, even larger. That's, of course, something that Ashwini will have to factor in the SAP new R&D work mode. Mr. Vishwanathan, if I can have you deliberate on this.
This is real risk, and part of it is predictable, part is not predictable. Even though El Nino impact, we all know, is to some extent, yes, we could able to predict. To the extent we predict, we have the budgets and things. However, to the extent unpredictable thing, like we are in agrochemical and also deal with, clearly with the weather. Our entire thing move along with the weather. Weather is good, rains are good, heavy rains are bad. Okay, rains on time is very good, but delayed is once again bad. Many things like where what we look at it is maybe better, or I can say predictive tools. Along with it, today, if you look at it, each and everywhere data points, as my friend said, is available. To the extent we want, the data is available, much beyond. Hey, look, then if there is a clear forecasting techniques, much beyond your normal, techniques can really help. Maybe a ML tool, or even I can say not AI, generative AI tools to get inside and then look. The weather pattern is given by IMRB. We have the weather patterns. However, having said that, as rightly said by Tanushree, what is predictable and what is possible in the budgets have been done. It is not a budgetary spend, it's a budgetary activity, because it can happen, it may not happen. There are the contingent ones.
Right.
But, we put all those things, and many a times we go out beyond our thing to the partners or to the experts in the world. What happens here is, when we benchmark this across the industry, maybe across a global industry, which I meant to say, if you want to, let's give an example, if you want to, compete on a cost, can I go to who's the least cost manufacturer of this particular thing in the world? Maybe a Chinese manufacturer. How do I go and benchmark against him on the total cost of TCO we take it? With the TCO on that, go against him rather than an Indian competitor or a competitor which next to me is there, or above me, one level above me kind of thing. Then what happens is we go and look at a trendsetter who's the least cost manufacturer. Maybe he has the advantage of that particular position at that particular location. But apart from those known facts, what are the other ability for us to go and beat him, not meet him? Where is the thing? It's a continuous exercise, not a one-off exercise. It's a continuous. So if you look at some maybe techniques or tools in this area, definitely. Having said that, do you have tools? Obviously, yes. Homegrown tools are available. There are certain AI tools do happen. Okay, have it. But as rightly said, it's all comprehensive across the,
Perhaps not.
That is important. Where it's important for, CFO is to have a clear business partnering with each and every aspect. Because one office which connects everything is a CFO office, because unfortunately, everything is measured. Now I'm happy that EHS has come all the way. You are right. Coming the current year itself, we are a sir. the assurance is required. And when you go through the assurance, all this question, how many human employees, how many empowerment, what is the spend on the rural, what is all those things. If you look at my IR, integrated report, it all will be answered. Having said that, yes, this is a risk which the companies have to face, and the mitigation is being planned to the extent what we have.
Mr. Agrawal, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing that needs to be addressed immediately in the next, or perhaps were supposed to be addressed yesterday when it comes to polycrisis? But in India, there need not be a polycrisis. Indian crisis is enough for the real estate industry to get affected. So what are those localized challenges that you feel needs to be addressed for better spend management, work and working capital optimization, etc.?
So in real estate, mainly we are dependent on the labor because it's a labor-intensive industry. So for me, the biggest challenge is the labor supply. Correct. If suppose like being like in Kalpatru, we have a lot of system processes, information systems, tools, right, so that the information can be shared, right, connectivity with the our contractor and supplier. Even though, because in Indian labor and our dependency on the labor, because if suppose any new schemes comes from the government, any Manrega type of schemes comes from in any state, then definitely the laborers will stop coming from for their job. So that's the one biggest challenge for me. I can't predict if suppose that tomorrow or maybe in the next month whether I'll be able to get the required labor force from the contractor to execute the required the planned the contract work. That's the one of the biggest challenge. And second, because being the real estate industry, it's getting organized. It's still unorganized in a lot of places. Like whether it is my contractor. When I talk about the contractor, almost the majority of the contractor are still having this system. I'm not able to get the idea whether my contractor is capable to execute my work within the timeline, whether he will be having not only the labor, like the material which he has to use at the site, the machinery he has to use at site, whether he will be able to do or put on the right time. So that's the biggest challenge for me. It's the contractor and the information of the contractor which I should have today. Like for example, when the steel industry, they give the example, they are getting the just-in-time information of their supplier. But being in the real estate industry, I'm not able to get my contractor information. That's the biggest challenge for me. And the rest, for me, like the material is, as I said, the cost of the material for me is very less, looking at the overall cost. And even though the cost management and from the material side, if you do the planning, you can save the cost little bit. But the dependency, because for me the total cost is only 10%, so it won't affect me, right? But the service from the contractor, that's affect me a lot.
I think that is one industry where skill development and providing infrastructure to your labor, your human resource becomes very important, because as he rightly said, that the policies, if they come in a way that your migratory worker is not coming to a city, then you have to develop a pool within your periphery, develop that skill, give them incentives to work. And how do you forecast that? And of course, that is another spend that you foresee. Ashwini, I'm going to have you have the last word on this. How is the SAP putting together some of the processes and using data and tech, and also R&D at your end about future-proofing the problems that perhaps these industries are already seeing or they were to solve yesterday? And as we are talking about ESG, EHS, we are talking a lot about the right balance of human resource and data and tech. And a lot of generative AI is also predicting things that, as Arpit said, about how much should we be relying on tech, how much of that data should we be using. Now, these are all problems that every industry stakeholder will have. We have the leaders here who have sorted some of these issues, but they see that as a major challenge with people they work with and other industries that come with. Tools that SAP is designing, and where do you see this problem getting sorted?
Again, I'll try to be as short as I can, but of course, I have many things I've noted down. But before I answer your question, this is the very first time, and believe it or not, in my entire career, I've always been on the other side. I've always been a consultant, having worked with the Big Fours and the top management consulting firms. But for the first time, I'm spending time with a product company, as I would say. This is the first time in my career I am looking at a time where business models are evolving faster than the technology. We are trying to catch up, okay? And that's where, and I think we were discussing during the evening snacks, the government probably would tell you this is something you need to do. But then we have to find the ways and means of doing it. It's not always easy, but the intent is good. And with keeping that in mind, I think technology needs to step up. So whether you talk about the e-invoicing portal, iron portal of Government of India never used to exist. It exists now. It will take some time to take steps, but we have to start with baby steps. Now, in the same breath, if I ask you, do you have an invoicing system which is integrated with the government iron portal of Government of India, which saves you time to the tune of 50%? In getting the GST back in time or stopping that leakage? And I think you, sir, talked about, or probably someone talked about, that we can block them, or I think you talked about if they've not paid the GST. But let me ask you, do you know after how many days did they pay the GST last time? Because if they don't pay it in time, you are non-compliant.
Yes.
So do you have that information for all of your suppliers? Do you have a dashboard which tells you red, yellow, green, that I have a set of, let's say, 500 critical suppliers, and there are 20 suppliers flagged as red who never pay GST in time, making me incompliant? And by the way, when I talk about sustainability for all of us, we have to look at it in entirety. You can't say I am sustainable, but my supplier base is not sustainable. I can't do that. If I do that, I'm not serving the country or my company, for that matter, the humanity. Right, because I am trying to clear my house, but I am buying from the supplier who is doing unfair means and producing goods which are not sustainable. Therefore, my product becomes non-sustainable. Then what's the fun in me doing everything, but my supplier base not following that particular effort and not helping the nature, so to say? But coming back to this, and I'll try and answer your question at the last, and I promise I'll be quick this time. You did mention, change in demand and managing through supply, which keeps changing for a consumer company very quickly. Have you ever thought that this happens with your buyer and supplier at the back end? Because your product orders change, your finished good orders change. So when you are so worried on having a system which is talking about your consumers and yourself to quickly manage this change in demand and supply, why are you not worried about your suppliers and buyers? And in the same breath, I'm going to ask you a question. It's very easy for me to connect with you after 30 minutes when we finish this, because I can connect you on LinkedIn very quick. Do you have a LinkedIn for between your buyers and suppliers? Where is your business network for your company? It's good that because I can manage it very well inside the four walls of my company. The moment I step out, I have somebody who can spill tea on me. How do you manage that? Right? So what is your business network? And then, you mentioned that any gap in the consumer fulfillment, you will lose business. Point taken, right? But have you ever thought the same way for your buyers and suppliers and casual user? You cannot retain talent. If you continue to push them to push papers or continue to make, sorry to say, PRs, which don't make sense at times because the world has changed. So what do you have? Can I order when I'm sitting with you on the mobile app very quickly for 10 items because you're trying to waste my time now? I don't like this. I'm new generation. I'm the casual user who deserves some good treatment. Are you doing the same with your with your people in your company, and for that matter, with your buyers and suppliers as well. Because if they don't get material in time, you probably would have your finished goods, but that will be not cheap. It'll be costly because they will have to buy emergency orders. So we need to think that way as well at the back end. If I'm not buying at the right price, I can't produce at the right price. That means I can't sell at the right price. That means I'm not competitive in the market. So people are not going to buy my product because I'll be 50 paisa extra, or maybe 5 grammage less, whatever way you want to look at it. And then Mugdha, you said use AI to predict the customer behavior. Again, to you, do you do the same to predict your supplier behavior? Let me tell you, after COVID, the pole positions have changed. I don't want to name companies, but a company is making a car, another company is making a car, a company is having a 9-month delivery waiting period, but the other company is having only 2 months. I don't have time for 9 months because the model might change after a year. So I will go with the company who can provide it to me quickly. So I'll buy from that company. Do you understand the suppliers have changed the pole position? It's not the buyer who's at the pole position. The suppliers don't like you, they will not provide you first. They might go to the other buyer to provide them first. And therefore, we need to understand their behavior as well. All of this, why I'm talking, is because it's very easy to say, I am managing cost inside my company because that's under my control. I can do sustainability inside my company. It's under my control. I can tell my people, from tomorrow, you don't do this. That's it. It's the policy. But your suppliers are not like that. You have to work with them. You have to be collaborative. So, Manoj, you mentioned about consuming. You don't consume food industry. You do. When you're selling homes, you're consuming food industry, yes, on a lighter note. But the joint development, the RWA development, how when you go to these societies to tell them, I want to build a new building with you, do you know how important the contract management obligation becomes? We all have seen the Brooklyn Bridge episode which happened. Do you know the exposure on that particular incident? It's $6 billion. You know the revenue of your company? And that's one incident. $6 billion. If somebody in contract management forgot, keeping it nicely, forgot to use a comma, you're gone. You are gone. So have you done the correct contract management while you're actually dealing or negotiating with these people? Because this can happen with you. The government at mass would agree with people who would get under pressure by the builder, and you will always be blamed, right? Because the people have that power. So labor management, I think you talked about theft, compliance, all of this happens in a real estate company. We have multiple real estate companies as a customer, It happens every single day. And like the other example I gave earlier, if somebody did it, and if that somebody is again getting hired on another location, how do you stop that? What mechanism do I have to stop this? That means you're continuously living in a risky world. And you have no way, you have tried to stop it. If you're trying to do it, maybe in some shape and form, you're relying on people because you are going through agencies. I can very well change my name, get a new Aadhaar card, do 10,000 things because you don't have checks and balances on not one factor, but 10 factors to tell you, no, there is some problem with this guy, right? So that's what I'm getting. Regulation, and I think AI to help in the contract management obligation is going to be the next big thing, is all I can tell you. People are really scared. Very quickly getting onto, you mentioned about GST, I talked about that. If you are non-compliant because of your vendor, you'll be being the brunt of it, and I can tell you, you will find it very soon. The government will start giving you ratings. If that happens, your vendor can put you in soup. So wait for that day or solve it now. Working capital is key. Everybody talked about it. We call accounts payable department as somebody who just signs check, right? That's all they do. That's how we see them. But have you ever thought accounts payable can be a profit generator? can you fund your inventory? Can you fund your entire AP? For that matter, can you do supply chain finance? Or let's say you're doing it to an extent, but do you have technology to tell you this particular customer from this supplier takes a 60-day payment term, you get a 30-day payment term? Because I know this information as a SAP, let's say, I can get you a 60-day payment term. That means you can save 0.25% more effectively on your invoice value. So then I'm generating cash for my company. My managing director would love it. So yeah, that's the one. And then risk management, we all talk about it. You tell me, and I challenge all of us, sometimes including SAP, you tell me how many of your suppliers are going to be bankrupt in the next 6 months. Can somebody tell me that? I challenge nobody can. Because there's no system which tells me every single day, these are my top 10 risky suppliers. And for what reason? Maybe it's reputational. You're sitting here, you love that supplier, but that supplier is also there in Singapore. And then in Singapore, he has a lawsuit which is for child labor. That means his company is going to go down, or he will have a complete halt on operations and whatnot, and therefore you're again trying to not find it because you don't have the information. Or the supplier has filed Chapter 16 in America, but he has not gone to NCLT in India, and therefore you still feel he's good, but his total bankruptcy is of 2 billion, his revenue is 1.5 billion. That means his India operations will shut down. There's no choice he has. And then we're talking about carbon. I said we need to look at it in totality. We talked about garbage in, garbage out. There are systems now. It doesn't happen anymore. Let me ask you a question. Very, very quick one. There's this particular item you buy from one supplier, another item from another supplier, another item from another supplier. Do you know this today? All three suppliers are belonging to a parent supplier. That means essentially these four companies are same. I don't know this. For that matter, when you look at your material, when you're ordering, I am writing computer, I'm writing laptop, I'm writing PC, I'm writing desktop, I'm writing desktop, I'm writing DP, I don't know what all. Can the system intelligently classify all this and tell me, this is your IT spend, boss? Because all of this will get categorized as miscellaneous. That's garbage in, garbage out. I call it analytics, but when it becomes intelligent, I call it spend analysis. And that's what we need to do, and there are technologies. Tanushree, you mentioned climate change. We can't control it for sure. There was a report between McKinsey and SAP that every 2.5 years there's a disruption which is happening in the supply chain. It is 6 months now. So brace for another impact, maybe another war. We do not know. You did mention, can you develop something which can tell us about climate, sir? We don't have, sorry. We are not meant for that. But I can tell you with the help of Logistics Business Network, if there is an item which is in high seas coming from a particular route, if there is a feed from data Bloomberg which says there's going to be a hurricane or whatsoever, then I can change that path for you. I have that technology. I think I've covered. I believe I've covered. Okay, good. So the entire point is whatever I spoke of as of today, you might be doing something, you might not be doing something. You probably want to do something. The good news is we have a solution right now, and that is given by SAP, probably not in the shape and form what you have as of today. And I'm not trying to sell here, but I'm trying to tell you these are the problems you brought out. I'm trying to give my 2 cents. This is not like you want to implement it today or buy it tomorrow. It's just that you need all of this someday or the other.
Okay, on that note, Ashwini, thank you so much. And thank you, each one of you, for sharing your insights about how you are somewhat future-proofing your enterprise and leading by example, and also being so candid about sharing your views on what are the challenges, where you are struggling at, and where some of stakeholders like SAP can come and make a difference in understanding and navigating through this VUCA and tuna world. The spend management practices will always be governed actually by aspects that are very unpredictable. So if we have systems in place that are able to help us in some way or the other by amplifying the work that the tech can do, then perhaps that is the way to go about it. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and Tanushree, for your time and for your insights. It was wonderful. This is a masterclass for everybody who's watching. Thank you so much.
Look, I'm going to keep it very quick. Sometimes it's good to be right at the bottom, and this is what I got in February 24, telling that we are probably the only nation in the world right now where the recession probability is 0. I am very sure it is not going to change even after the election result. But what does it mean? It means there's a lot of work coming our way. Okay, there's going to be growth, tremendous growth at a very fast pace, and we all would need to cope up. So we need to look at the spend management topic in a very different way. So when you talk about improving your processes, we all talked about, but it can't be only in your company. It has to be the entire value chain. And that's how we need to look at it holistically. From managing services to contingent costs, we did talk about that. It is not about representing how we are doing services procurement, but we also need to see managing the contingent labor work cost, which is a large problem for you. And by the way, a lot of our customers are doing it with the help of technology. So I'm going to come there as well. And there are benchmarkings which we do across countries, not only countries, but we are going to be getting into the states now within the country. So it's not only global but local, very much. Or from automating steps to connecting people, processes, and systems. That's what I talked about. What is your LinkedIn with your suppliers? If you don't connect with them properly, let me tell you, we are trying to resolve the customer focus, but we're missing this piece. This is a survey where a lot of people participated. You can look at those insights as well. Only 44% of the companies are saying that we are covered by a spend category technology or strategy as such as of today. If I ask you a question, what is going to be the packaging cost from your company if the pulp prices are going to get distracted in the next 6 months? That's where the question lies, and that's where we need to find an answer. You will believe it or not, and we tend to ignore this, and if you're a CFO, even a CIO for that matter, if you're a C-level person, there is a $105 billion violation which has been found just on expense sheets. There's pilferage, double charging, and whatnot. Do we have a solution around that? Less than 10% of executives are saying they are happy with the way they're monitoring the workforce risk. We talked about it. We all talked about it, right? So when there are such problems, then there are certain red thread themes, is what we call it as. This is what we are going to be following for the entire year, and this is going to continue. We are talking about the complete spend visibility. We are not only talking about the spend which you are doing on your material, your services, your indirects, your directs, but what about your employee spend? How are you looking at it? So that's complete spend visibility. The digital transformation, AI is here. We like it, we don't like it, it's not going anywhere. The AI use cases are going to increase. There's no way we are going to stop on those because the company needs them. The society at large needs them, right? So AI is going to be there. The transparency and resiliency on the supply chain part. I talked about vendor managed inventory. We do pay for it, but we don't see it. I don't have a live dashboard, which is real time with my suppliers to tell me, yes, I agree with you, you have made vendor managed inventory for me, by the way, which is connected with their ERP system. So I get the live feed back in my office. Resiliency, we talked about supplier risk. If let's say you do not know the reputational risk which your supplier is going to offer you, we all know what happened with one article from a particular company which brought down the valuation of a particular company in India by $150 billion. 3 days it takes for an article to sabotage what you have done in the last 30 years. So we need to be careful. Compliance, very important. You don't want your name on the front paper. For regulatory compliance or government compliance, for that matter, some employee going and passing on a statement which is harassment by the company. We all don't want that, especially your blue collars. They can make or break your entire business, because if they go and say this company, doesn't pay in time, that's it. People don't like it, right? cost containment, it is not about cost savings all the time. It is about containing the cost at times because the market is vulnerable. You can't control this. You can't control climate. But what you can control is what is going to happen if this climate change happens. For example, one of our customers in hotel industry, there's a drought coming in Australia. Therefore, they need to time their contract right because they basically import a lot of beef from there. If they don't time it, the contract in time, for that matter, an Ayurvedic, drug producer in the country, because there are no, better snowfall in Srinagar, they have to hedge their risk on saffron. Are they going to go to Iran, or they're going to hedge this now, write the contract now, write in time, or if you're a cold cough syrup manufacturing company, then you need to again hedge your bets on the raw material again. So what is that right time? Therefore, it's not about always cost saving, it's about cost containment also. Finally, driving the internal experience. Do not forget your customers, they love the experience you give them on mobile app. But if you don't give it to your employees, they're going to leave you very soon. Because you love your customers, you have to love your employees because they are the reason you're giving those products back to your customers. So why are you forgetting about them? We need to make that user count as well. And when I talked all about this, it brings me to the topic of all of this cannot be done alone by us. The work pressure is increasing. We are not going to be under recession. There are red themes which are coming up. We are talking about VUCA, tuna in 6 months and 2.5 years and whatnot. But with all of this comes a grave problem as well, which is the declining global population. What it means is the rise of AI is going to be evident. Now, when that happens, we need to embrace it. We need to understand what better it can do for us. And that is what we are trying to do with our customers. Keeping that in mind, this is what strategic spend management looks like. So you need to talk about all spend. Take control of every category. It can't be your material, it can't be your labor, it can't be your internal spending by your people in the company, but it has to be a holistic view of how this is happening. And you're talking about all trading partners. Have your own LinkedIn between your buyers and sellers. That's what they love. You have to have your user data-driven approach reimagined. And finally, we are looking at an end-to-end solution, and I think you talked about it. You can't have silos. You can't have one system plugging into this, another system plugging into that, third system plugging into that. While we don't want to undermine competition, but we also want to say if it is under one umbrella, that is where you reap the benefits. Otherwise, I tell you, a lot of it is not even integrated altogether. That's where majority of our customers are getting back to us that we did it probably because you are a little higher in pricing, for example, but now we are paying the price for it. And again, it's not a sales pitch. This is what I heard from my customer. I'm giving it back to you. You're free to take your call. But having said that, this is what we do best when it comes to spend management at SAP. And this is the vertical I lead for the country, for India subcontinent. This is end-to-end spend management. To answer your question very quickly, yes, SAP Taulia is the recent acquisition by SAP. We are the market leaders in supply chain finance solution. On top of it, what it gives a differentiator which you don't find in the market is we have the world's largest business-to-business network in the world with us, which is 7.5 million suppliers on the network, transacting $5 trillion of commerce every year. 5 trillion is equal to India and Australia GDP combined. That is how much money we are spending, our customers are spending on the business network of SAP. Okay, so we talk about Ariba, we talk about Fieldglass, Concur, there is Taulia, there's business network, iCertis, EcoVadis for your sustainability, Zip, to top it all, that's the business network, which basically is the LinkedIn between your company and your business partners. It could be your logistics partner, your consultants, your suppliers, your service providers, your manpower agencies and whatnot. All of it is going to sit on this very layer of how you're going to connect in the next 21st plus century with your business partners. And to top it up, we have the spend control tower, which guides you to run the spend management better inside your company. And if that is not enough, we have launched something called as Joule. That's the AI co-pilot, which is basically going to put a lot of insights, AI ML, in on top of it to help you drive your spend management agenda better in your organization. That's where I'm basically going to wanted to spend my time, since AI came up as a topic and I knew it, because we also asked them, are people interested about AI? Everybody tells us yes, and therefore I wanted to show you that we have already started delivering AI use cases, and there are much more which are basically coming in only in 2024 itself. So key takeaways: you need to have a shift of including working capital. We all talked about it. That's what I loved about the conversation. Whatever I kept in my presentation, we all talked about it today. So we talked about working capital. We talked about real-time visibility. We talked about controlling compliance. Technology is an aid to achieve all of this, and it is not about automation anymore. And finally, sustainability matters. We need to have it in its entirety. We can't have it only in my four walls. And that's where my request to you would be, let us ask the right questions back to our suppliers. And we are going to give you the business network, which will tell you the sustainability score of all these suppliers. And that is what in real sense, changing your goalpost on the ESG, not only from my perspective, but if I go back to the government and tell them I'm helping my suppliers become sustainable as well, that is what will add value to the entire ecosystem. Because you do it for your supplier base, let me tell you, you will do it for the mankind, because the same supplier base can be used by you as well. So that's where I would just stop and say thank you very much. We can always get connected, and thank you for coming in today.
SAP Spend Management Executive Exchange.